All right, we're back. We're gonna just brush on a coat of these of shellac onto these brackets that I've set up. So again, I've got my mixture here, and I'm just using. I found this brush. It's actually like a makeup brush, but it has really nice bristles on it, and it's a good size for what we're doing here. So again, I'm just gonna dip it in. It'll wick it up, and I'm just gonna do the edges. And I can see by looking at that this brush is gonna work really nice for this. Soaking right in. I don't really have to worry too much about drips because shellac is pretty forgiving, but I'm just trying to do the edges right now. There's actually this brush, it really loads it on. So I'd probably just do the tip in there, just the tip.
You can see we're different color already.
Yep.
It's really nice.
Trying to brush it off the edge instead of coming onto the edge. So you kind of start in the middle and work it to either edge. And it's going to soak in a lot on that first coat. So. I should be dry already. So.
Wow.
I really like this brush actually. Kind of glad I stole it from somebody.
Do you know who?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was like in a makeup set or something, so it was probably one of you girls. So. I mean, not you, Spencer.
So does it matter if you're brushing with the grain or against the grain?
It doesn't too much, but I like to try and brush with the grain. If you brush against the grain, then it'll start building up in kind of weird ways. That's a lot of it. Not worrying too much about drips. You can see it's, even though we know we got some drips going on, it's pretty forgiving. And by the time you get down to the end on your last one here, you're probably ready to go and put another coat on the first one. But I still have kind of the underside and the interior of them to do, so I'm just going to keep working my way down here. So I missed that side. Come back and hit the end grain again a couple times because the end grain is definitely definitely tends to soak up. Think of it as like a, wood's just a bundle of, the fibers are just like a bundle of straws, so it definitely soaks it up on the end grain a lot more, where it's all cut up. Back and hit all the end grain. I can see it's soaked into the end grain more, so I'm just going to hit that again. So I'm going to flip it around, just hit the tops and the insides of the brackets. And that really flooded on a lot of shellac. I should probably try and get rid of some of that. I'm going to start in the bottom and kind of drag it to the outside. And that's soaking up a lot of moisture there. Yeah. The sides of these in the front are obviously what's going to be most visible, so that's kind of what I'm more concerned about. And I'll put a little bit on the bottom too, just for consistency. Whenever we're finishing a project, especially if it's like a case or even these plaques, we want to make sure that we apply finish to both sides of it. If you wind up with finish on one side and not the other, what's going to happen is it's going to absorb moisture at a different rate, and it'll wind up cupping pretty good. So you want to make sure that you definitely seal and put a few coats of whatever it is, shellac in this case, on the back side of these. It's not so important in this case, because these are pretty small, and it's not really good. There's not really going to be a lot of wood movement or anything in this. But having them on this little stand just allows me to work on them, to brush it on without having to touch it, because it will get sticky, as you guys found out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had to wrench apart my fingers because they were like glued together.
Yeah.
I had a problem with super glue with that.
Yeah. You glued your fingers together with super glue?
Well, nearly.
Nearly?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a lucky miss then.
I had to wrench them apart just in time.
I remember we were making paracord bracelets.
Is that right?
Yeah. But yeah, this is sticky stuff.
Sticky stuff. Shellac.
They're really turning a nice color.
Yeah, I like this color. This really kind of dark shellac. And
If your shellac is less watered down, then it would.
or thinned.
Yeah, if it's thin, then would the wood turn a lighter shade than if it was thick?
No, it just puts a thinner layer on. So, yes, you're actually right. It would turn a lighter shade, but it's just putting a thinner layer of shellac on. So, the more layers of shellac, there's color in this, right? So the more layers we build on here, the darker it's going to get.
Oh, so it's kind of just like hurling a bunch of layers on it.
It's it puts a thicker layer on right now. If we thinned it out, it would wind up being a thinner layer of shellac.
Okay.
There's less. It's a solid that's dissolved in a solvent. The shellac, the button shellac is the solid, and the solvent is the alcohol. And the alcohol evaporates off pretty quickly, leaving behind the shellac on the surface, which is hopefully all even. But that's how it works. So I'm just gotta turn around, get the other side, underside of this. And again, I don't really care too much about that. I am gonna hit the end grain again, and then hit the sides again, and then we'll see where we're at in terms of how they look. But I mean, the good thing about shellac too is that you can build up the finish. It doesn't have to be a real high gloss finish if you don't like that sort of look. You can work up to that if you like the French polish look, but if you want just a satin finish, so satin just means it's less shiny, right? So when you're talking about finishes, you're talking about satin or gloss, so, and paints too.
Sophie is more like a front.
Yeah, that was pretty thick, this cut, so I think we probably should have thinned it out a little bit more, but it's no big deal. We can always thin it a little more. We're doing it.
Can shellac be used for multiple purposes? Or just wood?
I think they use it in some candies and stuff. And I know, well, I don't know, but I think they also use it in, like ladies can get their nails polished with shellac. Like a French polish with shellac on it, which makes sense because if you do this a lot, you actually you wind up building up a coat of it on your hands and on your nails, and it's pretty shiny.
Cool.
Yeah. But okay, I'm just gonna turn all these so I can do the sides a little better.
Huh. Is it true that jelly beans have it on them?
That's what I heard. I don't know if they still do, but they used to. So beetle poop. Well, it's just like honey. It's bee vomit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that in my oatmeal basket.
You have bee vomit in your oatmeal?
Yes.
Nice.
Think about that, Sophie.
Delicious bee vomit.
Yeah.
That was a lot of shellac I just put on there. Just kind of want to make sure that if you got a big glob on there, you kind of spread it out. So I really like this brush. So.
It does look very consistent.
It's very nice. It's like a fine artist brush. It's got a kind of got a bullnose shape to it, or a thumbnail shape to the end of it, but it just holds a lot of shellac and it actually goes on really nicely. So for small parts, I might try this for carvings too, getting in all those little areas. It's kind of hard to use a pad sometimes when you're actually finishing a carving because the pad just hits the top of the surface, right? But it doesn't get all the little nooks and crannies, so
Yeah.
sometimes you need to brush it on. But you're not so much worried about building up a large layer of shellac with carving. You just want to have something to seal it.
Yeah.
All right, so that's about it. That's just about one coat on here, and done a little bit more on some of the end graining, but I've done the faces twice now, and you can just keep going over it and building it up as you like, to whatever thickness you like. You can take some fine sandpaper like 320 grit or 400 grit and sand it in between coats, which will kind of level everything out. But that's it for now. For caring for your brushes, you can leave this soaking in some alcohol, which I'll probably do right now, just because I'm going to brush on some more. But a lot of times I'll just hang them And if I know I'm just using this specifically for shellac, I'll just leave it hanging like this. It'll dry hard, but then I'll just dissolve it in some alcohol when I'm ready to use it again. So yeah, little tricks of the trade. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll come back and show you the finished product once these kids have got the rest of their French polishing done. All right, thanks for joining us.